So where are you physically? I've forgotten. You're in
I'm in London, Ontario.
London, Ontario.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, southwest of Deshkon-Zibi, which is the river that runs through the city.
Okay.
Or Antler River is another name for it, which is where the new reading series' name has come from.
Yeah.
Antler River Reading Series. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm really so glad you're doing this because I've looked at the first few and it's just a great resource for us, for us to connect with each other.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, it's been interesting to see the ways in which practices have kind of independently evolved in very similar ways, and then also, ways in which they diverge, in which we might learn from each other. Hello, Kim. Hi.
Sorry, I couldn't find the link, so.
No sweat.
I'm here now, though.
You are indeed. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing okay?
Where are you?
I'm in London, Ontario.
Okay.
My apartment in Wortley Village, as it's known to a friend of mine, the village of tiny vegetarians. It's a sort of hamlet.
Right.
So I know that I sent the questions in advance. I'm wondering, would you like to walk through them, or shall we dive right in?
Dive in?
Please dive in.
Okay. Welcome to episode 5 of Talking with the Organizers, presented by Antler River Poetry, formerly Poetry London, this week featuring Poets Corner reading series with its collectives Kim Traynor and Adrian Drobnys. Thank you both for joining me.
Happy to be here.
So Poets Corner reading series, originally called Poetic Justice, based in Vancouver. A monthly reading series began in 2010, and it has since hosted over 600 poets. I was delighted to find out over the course of research in anticipation of this interview. And I wonder whether each of you might offer a word about how you got involved with a series and about the literary community in Vancouver that perhaps has been, if not created by it, maybe facilitated by it, presumably centering on Massey books.
Well, we both have a similar, I think, initial experience in terms of not being in on it from the beginning. It's gone through several iterations. So I read when it was Poetic Justice, and we were in a Mexican restaurant at the New Westminster SkyTrain. And that was at the time hosted by the then Poet Laureate of New Westminster. That was before, I think, James Felton took over, and he then carried the whole series to Massey Books. And so he was there for a while. And I never, Adrian, did you ever see a reading at Massey Books? I never had the chance.
I never saw a reading in New West, so I kind of got, I became aware of it. Massey Books is walking distance from me, and was a lovely venue. We can talk a little more later about where, we hope to be live again at a different venue, but that was a really good place for poetry. And
Indigenous owned and operated bookstore in Chinatown, right? Yeah. As I recall, not a big space to read in.
Yeah.
But cozy.
Yeah. I think we're going to be moving to Fairleigh Dickinson University and have a larger and more equipped space for technology and things like that. And also have, I think a good academic connection for our poets with our liaison there, who's teaching a typography class and is interested in making chapbooks with some of our poets, things like that, which are very attractive. And of course, one of the things, that was kind of down your list on the questions, but, having readings on Zoom allows you to grow your audience, not necessarily your local audience, but, I think we will have potentially more people attending, and we'll have a good opportunity at some point, assuming we can keep everything balanced and working, to have mixed virtual live events at some point.
Live stream from the campus that you'll maybe be moving to, yeah?
Yeah, it's still downtown. It's not far from where we were. So, so
Yeah, we moved from Chinatown to Yaletown, so
Yeah.
not far. But the way we both got involved was James Elton put out a plea for help, a plea of existential despair. He couldn't do it anymore. He was doing everything, right? Like
Yeah.
he was doing all of the organizing, he was doing the fundraising, he was doing the grant writing, hosting. He had this giant suitcase he was using to carry around to the venue. And he was going to actually close it down. So Adrian responded, I did, and other members who became part of the collective. And we are two of the last standing from that
Still a
first
few of
meeting.
us. But I mean, it's such a heroic thing when one person does it all. And I know there are a few reading series like that. You know, it is great to be part of a team, and you know, James' great love of poetry just carried everything, and he set up some really good kind of ways of doing things. He left us with all these tools, and you know, for communication and spreadsheets and grant proposals, and you know, it was really you know, really launched us. And you know, I think it's been fun to run with. You know, there's been some innovations, I think, particularly Kim can talk about the 1 Minute Poet series
Oh,
that
sure.
she envisioned.
Well, when we were about to go live and start, and we just found Fairleigh Dickinson University as our new venue, and we were really excited about that. And then everything shut down and the world ground to a halt. But we pretty quickly transitioned to Zoom. We were one of the early groups, I think, to do that, or at least we weren't late to do it.
Early for sure.
Yeah. And our audience, the regular members, were really super happy to just be able to connect again, even if it was via Zoom. And we had at least the same numbers, if not more, joining us. And very quickly, we started to get people coming from very far afield and became regulars, which was kind of cool. So from the States, from Maine, from Ontario, from the Yukon. And then sort of side by side with that, I had noticed that we have a series in Vancouver called the Dead Poets Reading Series. Right. So you get, as a poet, you're invited to choose a dead poet and read their poetry. In fact, I had been scheduled to do that too when the pandemic hit, and that reading fell apart for a while. Yeah. But Isabella Wang, who's actually going to be a featured poet with us shortly, she's part of that group, and she started posting on YouTube like almost a daily poem, like a pandemic poem. And I sort of ran with that. Okay, I stole her idea. And I thought, oh, we can do something like that, and we can highlight, because we were finding that there were a lot of poets who were just coming out with their book, and they wanted to do a launch, and they couldn't launch because there was no audience. And so we thought, well, we can help little publishers and poets with collections by highlighting their book, by letting them do a 1 minute poem. And I don't know how the idea came about, but we decided, yeah, let's make it to just differentiate it from the dead poets. We thought, well, let's do, well, first of all, they're alive, right? That helps. And then we thought, well, let's make it short. So 60 seconds, short, sweet, 1 minute video poem. And actually, James was really helpful with that too, right? Because I would have just gone, oh, let's just throw it up on YouTube. And he was like, no, we have to have organization here. So we wanted a more formal structure where we contact the publisher, get permissions, create a proper YouTube channel. I would do up a poster for it, all that kind of stuff. So he actually made a lot of work for me, I have to say, because it got pretty complicated, but it's been worth it.
Yeah, there was always this kind of like, you know, he was a great organizer, and you know, we benefited from that. And then we were always kind of moving in a more minimalist direction.
How can we pare this down?
But I mean, Kim, I was trying to remember, was the part of the 1 minute, part of it had something to do with the technological limitations, like you could put something for 1 minute exactly?
Oh yeah, partly the initial limit for you, Instagram actually is a 1 minute post. Okay. And I think you can get around that, but at that stage I was so technologically incompetent, I said, let's just stick to the 60-minute limit.
But it's a good a good length, I think, for
Yeah.
the poet to,
Yeah.
draw on something and hold the reader's attention. And
But as we know, poets don't pay attention and they don't do what you ask them to do. And sometimes they have little riots, which we've had too. But in fact, I saw this really funny ad on Instagram the other day. Have you or someone you know dated a poet? You may be entitled to compensation. I kind of feel like that as someone who runs a poets reading series.
yeah,
I think we may be entitled to compensation at some point. But you'll get someone who'll send in a 1 minute poem, bless them, and it's like 1 minute and 10 seconds or 1 minute and 50 seconds, or it's like less is good, or they don't send it up, right? So it's like, well, but it's a 1 minute video poem and you sent me your voice. And they'll be just, I'll just add some pictures. Okay. And then I'll say, well, oh, all right, I'll do that. And then they'll say, but let me see the pictures first. It's like, I'm not doing a video for you. But
yeah. I mean, I was saying to another poet, and I know, so we love poets, we are poets, but it said, anywhere two poets gathered, they'll get into trouble. And she said, yeah, even one, with himself, which is true.
It's like when I was at the Banff writing residency in 2016, I think, and the fiction writers are so organized and disciplined, and they're working for like 14 hours a day at their desks. The poets are just wandering about, straggling through the campus, and maybe a line comes to them at some point, and then it's time to go have whiskey, right? What else does one do?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm being hard on the
field. No. But we are striving to give voice to poets, emerging, established, and to make that a good experience for them, and to put a little money in their pockets too. So all of the above is.
So they do get an honorarium for the 1 minute poem, which we were happy to do. We got a digital grant because of the pandemic, and that's helped us do that. And we've been able to top up the monthly reading fee for the regular feature poets. And really we're always trying to diversify and bring in new voices, new people. We've had a really great range so far, I think, of different ages and backgrounds, and some new poets, some old poets. We had the Griffin Poetry Prize winner read for us. Didn't he win?
Well, we had like a,
or at least he was nominated
at the same time.
Right.
Jane Monroe and Ian Williams were two of our recent features, and that's one of the, they had a good dialogue with each other. I like having pairs of poets. That was a good innovation of James, to have an established and an emerging, and it hasn't always been quite like that. But the other thing was themed readings. So older poets, younger poets, just we had, launch of a collection on suicide, environmental. We did selections from Sweetwater,
which is an ecological anthology on water.
So Yvonne Blomer, I was trying to remember the name. But anyway, just and I guess the other thing is having an open mic, which Kim and I have talked about, is not ubiquitous anymore, and brings a kind of wild energy. And it's we're all having to become like these technologically savvy people with video production skills and all that, and sometimes it can be a little bit challenging to manage all that, but we just long for, like, can we just put out a sheet of paper and have the people write on it, the read at the open mic, and one day we will again, but we have to kind of juggle all that, and
there's a lively group that come and really long to read their poems, and we have had to have it's usually like a 3 minute reading time for each open mic person. We've had some kerfuffles, didn't quite get to fisticuffs, but
Yeah, there were some occasional communication glitches, shall we say. But
not magnified by Zoom, right? Because
yes, definitely,
yeah.
definitely. When you are trying to just, email and collective email anyway, but yeah, it got sorted out, and it is, it does also bring people to the readings. Often there's a wait list for the open mic.
Yep.
What would you say makes a great reading?
Well, I think it's it's kind of magical, but there's a engagement between um, the poet and the audience, and you know, um, I really like something Kirby said about it, kind of bringing experience from the theater to it. Like, we have a host who has a theater background, and being able to, have set everyone at ease and bring out the best, and um, have, like, when we had Jane Monroe and Ian Williams, their interaction just at the beginning and at the Q&A, and kind of feeding off of each other's energy, really, I think, made a great reading. And oh, what else?
I think I agree that that energy where there's actually interaction between the audience and the readers can be really great. It can be a bit of a problem with Zoom if everyone's muted and you don't get, it's like you're in a muffled, soundproofed room in a studio and you're recording a song, but it's like everything's sucked out of you and you're just not sure if anyone's even getting what you're saying. But I think we've used the chat feature a lot for that, for giving feedback. And we started off by letting everyone unmute and just say something at the end of each poem, but that gets a bit crazy because people forget to mute themselves, and then we have weird side conversations and cats meowing and stuff like that in the background. So then we switched to waving. That's okay, that works, but it's not quite the same.
No, but it's really interesting how people have adapted to the technology too, and figured out how to use the chat to show their appreciation and their interest and enthusiasm. And I think some readers find that distracting, and so we teach them how to turn it off. And
they don't realize that they are in control of their destiny.
It's good, but it's like, not having that, what I heard somebody describe it as, that poetic when you have a reading.
Yeah, the involuntary sigh from the audience.
Right?
Very satisfying.
So there is that kind of coldness, which is just hard to deal with.
Although we have also a lot of our audience will have their camera on, which is great. It's not like it's just dead space. I have seen some readings where you don't really see anybody, and it does feel very disembodied, whereas most of ours, partly I think because a lot of them have been together in the past in real flesh, that they're quite comfortable turning their cameras on and even talking a bit at the beginning before we start.
I think we might encourage that a little more too, because it is nice to have that.
Yeah, for sure.
Chat, which is just kind of missing a lot from the Zoom experience.
And speaking of sort of prefatory matter, I guess, and the conversations that take place before the readings begin, I wonder whether you'd say a few words about your thinking through land acknowledgements in your position as hosts on unceded territory, and whether that relationship to land acknowledgements has changed as you've moved online, and things that you are mindful of, things that you find beneficial to include in land acknowledgements, how you think about them generally as hosts.
Well, yeah, I'm really glad you asked this question, because it makes us think about it more deeply. And I don't know that acknowledgement, the content of the acknowledgement has changed that much by going online. Although it does, because it does bring people in from different places, then people will talk about, I'm coming to you from, Treaty 6, or, Clean It, or, whatever it is. And so that's a good educational opportunity. I was thinking, you know, we are poets and we understand the importance of symbols and the power of words, but we want those words to have weight and meaning. And so I think ideally we want this to be a process of engagement with Indigenous people, and I think I'd like to do more of that personally. But also, I was thinking, well, it's kind of literally the least we can do. And so I was thinking, how could I make it more meaningful from my own perspective? And I think words aren't enough. So I was thinking what I'd like to do is add a one of the calls to action to the acknowledgement when we do it, and from the Truth and Reconciliation report, and just reflect each time on, well, what can each of us do to make that a reality? That I think could be helpful. I also feel personally a little sometimes overwhelmed with the magnitude of the issue, and also of all the issues of social justice and concerns in our world, that I want us to be mindful of when we gather in this form. So anyway, those are my thoughts on that, and I want to hear Kim's reviews about it.
Have you got a word to add here, Kim?
No, I think Adrian covered it really nicely. That was the first thing I think we did when we decided we were going online, was to create a kind of, not a script exactly, but just the kinds of things we wanted to make sure that we included, and that was top of the list. And it is true, it changes depending on who's the host. We usually have two hosts, so there's someone who does the tech and then someone who's talking, and so the location will change as well. Like right now I am on Coquitlam territory because I'm at the college where I teach, right? So I've seen sometimes at UBC the host will do a territorial acknowledgement where they'll simply refer to Turtle Island, recognizing that there are people joining them from all across North America, which is pretty cool too. So that's another possibility we could somehow work into our discussion. But I like that idea of bringing in the calls for action. We should talk about that more.
Yeah. So something to discuss.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm wondering about, it might be boring to those who are not involved in a reading series in some capacity, but I'm wondering about like the mechanics of how the series actually functions, whether you meet regularly, whether presumably those meetings would take place now online, how many members there are in the collective, whether you sort of distribute roles differently amongst the group. I mean, this, again, it's probably very boring for anybody who's not involved in a series, but it would be, I think, interesting to hear for those who are.
We could try to make it super fascinating. I do all of my work from a tent.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. I'm at Semaphore Meadows right now.
With a tent with great internet.
It's fabulous. I'm using what is it called? Like there's those satellite ones that you can get now. Satellite Wi-Fi. It is very, right now we're at 4, maybe 5 people in the collective.
Yeah,
we're working on the 5th.
And really working hard on
coaxing that one back into the fold. Maybe you have to bake some cookies or something for encouragement or enticement. So we had one meeting in person all together when James first brought us all together, and I believe that was the only time. And then with the pandemic, we started meeting by Zoom almost exclusively. We've met a few times since in Adrian's backyard which is lovely. And it has lots of flowers and green grass and fresh air. So we're not, getting virus loads. And we do split it all up. So we have someone who does all of the accounts. She does a great job. And she also pitches in with other things. Like she often does the write-up after the event. And sometimes as a poet, she does the open mic. Adrian is the chair and does the grants and the official communication with the poets. And I kind of run the website and do more of the graphic art stuff. So I do the posters and I do the one, at the moment I'm doing the 1 minute poem. We're at the moment short of a social media coordinator.
Keep the website up, and we've got a newsletter person.
Oh,
we
yeah,
kind of, we kind of fell into like a monthly Zoom meeting a couple of weeks before our reading, kind of in between the monthly reading. And then, what's going to go in the newsletter and who are going to be our feature readers, who do we need to contact? And so we do each have our roles, and one of the things I guess we were talking about last time is kind of having a little more redundancy. Like, so if somebody can't do the newsletter that month, one of the other ones of us can take it over more easily, and
more people would distribute the work. Like right now I'm kind of at too much, I'm too much at a limit. So I need to, I'm at the point where I'm trying to convince my teenage son that he needs to be the social media coordinator.
Which he would,
and
do
he would be
fantastic.
Fabulous because he's really, really good at tech.
And we have no conflict of interest policy, but what we did do is actually find at some point we had a need to spell it all out, write it all down, like how does this organization work, and then we went and we got a bank account. We did all these like grown-up things, and
and we take minutes at our meetings because eventually we might want to be an official society, be all grown up.
And that is kind of where we're headed, like the idea that we could be a society and get nonprofit status, and just do have larger reach in every sense. But burnout, even when you have a group, I think is a kind of ever-present hazard.
I wonder, to conclude, whether you'd each offer a word from your perspective as poets whose practice is, in some sense, I suppose, individuated, and you write by yourself often, presumably, unless you're part of like a collective or writing collaborative poetry. And yet, I mean, the work itself, your influences, familiarity with language, naturally you're going to be involved in a kind of literary community, even if you're practicing by yourself. But I wonder if you'd say a few words about the importance of the establishment of literary community for you and your practice, and whether anything sort of peripheral to the series has resulted as a result of that. I'm thinking maybe of like workshop settings or ways in which your practice as a poet has been informed and influenced by being a part of the community and nascent society that you're both contributing to.
Well, I think it's just been a great opportunity to meet some really good poets and hear their work. And that's always good when you're a poet. I think one of, probably shouldn't say this out loud, but one of the commitments I made to myself was not to let this interfere with my own writing. I don't know how realistic that is, but community is so important, as we know as writers, that, the gains are great, and also what I think Vancouver is a really vibrant community that way. Like there's a lot of reading series in BC and in Vancouver, and I know there are in other places, but I think we need a lot of those. We need a lot of different kind of perspectives on the art. So, but I don't think, I've read something, I've been to a reading and that just made me run off and write some, but I'm sure it changed my thinking about, I just can't think of a good example right now. I'm sorry, but it's but even like, Kim read and she had some accompanying video material, and I'm a scientist and and it had scientific content, and I thought, oh yeah, that was a really interesting treatment of that. And so, I think it just can really broaden your views of poetry.
Um, yeah, as Adrian said, I've been making poetry films and trying to branch out in a different direction. And I actually do a lot of collaborative work with a colleague of mine who is a fiddle player and a musician. So she does the soundtracks. We're actually just now preparing for a performance of my last book at a new media gallery. So it's kind of branching out in a totally different direction. But one thing my aspiration is for the series has always been to try to sometimes poetry readings can be a bit quiet and I want to liven them up a little bit and also broaden them out so that we can bring in some more multimedia and spoken word and not have that kind of segmented, this is the academic
like
poetry,
maybe even people that aren't poets will come to
yeah, what? We have to talk about this, Adrian. You didn't mention that to me before. And I went to a great series once. I read in Calgary, I think it was The Flywheel, but I can't remember if that sounds familiar. Anyways, it was in a bookstore, but afterwards, everyone went to a pub and we sat and we talked a lot and we drank a lot, but we talked a lot about poetry. And that's what I really aspire to with our series. I would love, now we obviously can't do this with Zoom, but after our readings, I'd love to be able to invite the featured poets to go down the block to Yaletown somewhere to a pub and just talk shop.
And that will come again. That will come again.
And then anyone in the audience, like if they're open mic poets, and that might be a great way for newer poets to actually get to talk to more established ones and learn some things and share some things. So I think that'd be a really cool connection.
Lovely. Excellent. With gratitude to both of you, Kim Trainer and Adrian Drobnys, this has been episode 5 of Talking with the Organizers, featuring Poets Corner reading series. Thank you both again for joining me. This has been delightful.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
My pleasure. Take care.
Take care.